The rain fell gently as they lowered Victor's casket into the ground. Marta stood motionless, her black dress soaked through makeup smudged from tears she could no longer differentiate from the raindrops. 40 years of marriage, 4 decades of building a life together, now condensed into this wooden box, disappearing into the earth. She clutched a single white rose, the last of thousands he had given her throughout their marriage. Rebecca stood 3 feet away, under a large black umbrella. While others might have mistaken her rigid posture for grief, Marta recognized the impatience in her daughter's body language. Rebecca checked her watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, her eyes dry, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. When had her daughter become this stranger? The priest's final words faded into the patter of raindrops. People began to disperse, offering Marta condolences, with tight embraces and whispered platitudes. Rebecca stepped forward, only when the cemetery workers appeared, gesturing impatiently toward the waiting limousine. "We should go, Mother. Arthur is meeting us at the house for the will reading." Marta nodded, placing her rose atop the casket before turning away. The finality of that simple gesture nearly broke her composure. She steadied herself, drawing on a lifetime of dignity that had seen her through countless challenges. Victor had always admired her strength. She would not falter now. In the limousine, silence stretched between them like a wall. Through the rain-streaked window, Marta watched the city pass by the parks where she and Victor had walked on Sunday mornings, the restaurant where they had celebrated their anniversaries, the neighborhoods where they had built their life. Rebecca's fingers moved rapidly over her phone, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she typed incongruously bright against the somber backdrop of the day. Marta said nothing. Her silence was not defeat, but a conscious choice. She had learned long ago that words hastily spoken rarely served their purpose. Victor had taught her that patience was often the wisest response. The mansion appeared through the rain, grand and imposing with its colonial columns and manicured gardens. Marta and Victor had purchased it as a crumbling historic property 4 decades ago, painstakingly restoring it room by room, year by year. Every doorknob, every floorboard, every rosebush in the garden contained a memory of their life together. Arthur's car was already parked in the circular driveway. The family lawyer had been with them for 30 years, handling every contract, every investment, every legal matter with meticulous care. He greeted Marta with a warm embrace at the door, his eyes communicating sympathy his professional demeanor wouldn't allow him to express fully. "Mrs. Sullivan, my deepest condolences." Victor was not just a client, but a dear friend. Rebecca interrupted the moment, striding past them toward the study. "Let's proceed with the reading, Arthur. I have appointments later this afternoon." Arthur's eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional composure. "Of course. Shall we use the study as Mr. Sullivan preferred?" The study, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furnishings, had been Victor's sanctuary. Marta ran her fingers along his desk as she entered, remembering countless evenings watching him work his glasses perched on the end of his nose, his fountain pen moving steadily across important documents. The room still smelled faintly of his cologne. Arthur settled into a chair, removing papers from his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Rebecca positioned herself in Victor's chair behind the desk, an action that felt to Marta like a premature coronation. Marta took a seat across from her daughter, hands folded in her lap, the weight of her grief evident in the slight tremor of her fingers. "I'll begin with the formal reading," Arthur announced, adjusting his glasses. "This last will and testament of Victor James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, hereby declares—" The legal language washed over Marta like distant waves. She found herself focusing instead on the photographs on the bookshelf behind Rebecca Victor, holding newborn Rebecca, the 3 of them on a beach vacation, Victor proudly attending Rebecca's college graduation. A family. They had been a family once. Arthur's voice shifted tone, bringing Marta's attention back to the present moment. "To my only daughter, Rebecca Sullivan, I leave my entire estate valued at $300 million, including all properties, investments, and business holdings." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marta's expression remained composed, though her hands clutched each other more tightly in her lap. Rebecca's face transformed, a calculating smile spreading across her features as she leaned forward in Victor's chair. "And to my wife." Marta's question was soft but clear. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "There are no specific bequests listed for Mrs. Sullivan in the document I have here." Rebecca's smile widened as she stood walking around the desk to face her mother directly. The transformation in her demeanor was instantaneous and chilling. Gone was the impatient but respectful daughter of the funeral. In her place stood someone Marta barely recognized. "You're not getting a single cent of my money. Nothing!" Rebecca's voice cut through the room with unexpected venom, each word precisely targeted. "The $300 million are mine now, Mother. It's all mine, and you're irrelevant here." Marta's breath caught in her throat. The cruelty in her daughter's voice was unlike anything she had ever heard, even during their worst disagreements. "Rebecca, please," she whispered, still dressed in black, her makeup smudged from tears. "We just buried your father. How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" Rebecca laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. "You know what's cruel, Mother. That for all these years you've lived like a parasite off of Dad's money. But those days are over. This house is mine. The money is mine, and you are surplus to requirements." Arthur cleared his throat uncomfortably from the corner of the living room. Something in his eyes told Marta there was more to the situation than appeared. A slight furrow between his brows, a tension in his jaw, signals she had learned to read during decades of business meetings at Victor's side. Rebecca began pacing the study like a conqueror surveying new territory. "You have 24 hours to leave," she declared, her voice cold and measured. "And don't you dare bother me again. You are not my responsibility. For 40 years you lived off of Dad, but now you're going to learn what it's like to actually work." Marta's hands trembled, not with fear, but with an indignation that was growing like fire in her chest. This was the little girl she had held in her arms, the one she had taught to walk, the one she had comforted through every nightmare. How had that child become this cold stranger? She rose slowly from her chair, smoothing the creases in her black dress with dignity. Her voice, when it came, was steady, despite the storm of emotions within her. "I buried my husband today, Rebecca. Your father. Is this truly who you've become?" "This is who I've always been," Rebecca snapped. "You just never noticed because you were too busy playing the perfect wife, letting Dad handle everything while you arranged flowers and planned dinner parties." Marta absorbed the verbal blow without flinching. "You did at least read the entire will, Arthur?" she asked, turning toward the lawyer. Something in Arthur's tone made Rebecca stop in her tracks. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face for the first time. Arthur exchanged a look with Marta, a moment of silent communication that spoke volumes. "Nothing important," the lawyer replied, though his slight smile suggested otherwise. "I suppose you'll find out eventually." Rebecca stalked toward Marta, her designer heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "I don't care what that paper says. The money is mine, this house is mine, and you are leaving right now." She pushed her mother toward the door with such force that Marta almost lost her balance. "And you know what else? I don't want to see you at any family events either. As of today, you are dead to me." Marta didn't argue. She walked with measured steps to the foyer, past the grand staircase, where Rebecca had once slid down the banister as a child past the living room, where they had opened Christmas presents together, for decades past, the memories that seemed to reach for her from every corner of the house. She paused at the front door, looking back at her daughter. "Your father would be disappointed, Rebecca, not because of the money, but because of who you've become." With those words, she stepped out into the rain-soaked garden. The slam of the door echoed through the house like a gunshot. Marta stood in the garden under the light rain, looking at the house where she had been happy for 40 years, the windows she and Victor had chosen together, the garden they had planted, the memories that were now turning to ash. The white roses Victor had planted for their 30th anniversary drooped under the weight of the raindrops, petals falling to the ground like tears. She walked slowly toward her car, each step feeling like she was carrying stones in her shoes. Her black dress was getting soaked, but she didn't care. The cold of the rain was nothing compared to the ice in her heart. "Mrs. Marta, please wait." Arthur came running after her, a folder clutched protectively under his arm to shield it from the rain. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Marta looked into his eyes and saw something that calmed the storm inside her complicity knowledge. The same expression she had seen on Victor's face when he had an ace up his sleeve during difficult business negotiations. "Is this about what I think it is?" she asked in a low voice. He nodded gravely. "Your husband was smarter than Rebecca can possibly imagine, and you need to know the whole truth before it's too late." They got into Arthur's car, a sensible luxury sedan that reflected his practical but refined taste. As they drove away from the mansion, Marta caught sight of Rebecca watching from the main living room window. Her expression had changed from triumphant to worried, no doubt concerned about the private conversation taking place between her mother and the family lawyer. Arthur drove in silence through the rain-slicked streets of the city. Occasionally he would glance at Marta as if to check that she was holding together. She sat upright, her posture betraying nothing of the turmoil within her. During the drive, her mind drifted between disbelief and a dull rage that was growing in her chest like wildfire. 40 years of marriage to Victor, of building not just a fortune together, but a family. And now her own daughter had thrown her out as if she were a stranger. They arrived at Arthur's office building, an elegant limestone structure downtown that housed his private practice. The receptionist had already gone home, leaving the offices quiet and dimly lit. Arthur led Marta to his personal office, a space she had visited many times with Victor over the years. The walls were lined with diplomas and family photographs, a stark reminder of everything she had just lost. "Please sit, Marta," Arthur said, using her first name for one of the few times in their long acquaintance. His eyes reflected a mixture of pity and something else, something that looked like hope. She sank into the leather chair in front of his desk, the same place where she and Victor had signed their wills years ago. Despite her composed exterior, exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. The funeral, the betrayal, the sudden homelessness, it was almost too much to bear in a single day. "Marta, there's something Rebecca doesn't know." Arthur began opening the folder he had brought from the car. "Your husband was an extraordinarily forward-thinking man, and he knew his daughter's character very well." Marta pulled a handkerchief from her purse and dried the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. "Arthur, please, I've already lost my husband. Now I've lost my daughter. Don't give me false hope." "This isn't false hope, Marta. It's legal fact." He spread several documents across the desk, pointing to official seals and signatures. "Do you remember when Victor insisted we all meet alone 6 months ago without Rebecca?" Marta nodded slowly. Victor had been very specific about that meeting. He had said he had private matters to discuss, things that concerned only them as a married couple. At the time, she had assumed it was about his health, perhaps a diagnosis he hadn't been ready to share with Rebecca. That day your husband prepared an addendum to his will, a very specific clause that would only be activated under certain circumstances. Arthur pointed to a paragraph in one of the documents written in the precise legal language that Victor had always appreciated for its clarity. "If Rebecca demonstrated extreme cruelty towards you, especially during the period of mourning, the entire inheritance would automatically revert to you." Marta's heart stopped for a moment. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband knew exactly what kind of person your daughter was becoming, and he made sure to protect you." Arthur smiled for the first time all day. "The $300 million, the house, the properties, the investments, it all becomes yours again if we can prove that Rebecca met the conditions of the clause." The taste of Marta's tears changed. They were no longer tears of sadness, but of an emotion she couldn't define. Relief, perhaps, or justice. "And how do we prove that?" Arthur took out his phone and showed it to her. On the screen, a recording app was clearly active. "I recorded the entire conversation this afternoon. Every cruel word, every insult, every moment she threw you out of the house where you had just held a wake for your husband." Marta put her hands to her face and cried. But now she was crying with gratitude for Victor, her dear Victor, who was still taking care of her, even from beyond the grave. "There's more." Arthur continued, his voice gentle but assured. Your husband also left very specific instructions. You must allow Rebecca to believe she is in control for a while. You must let her make mistakes. Let her show her true character to the world. Only then can we activate the clause permanently. You mean I have to keep pretending that I'm broke, that I have nothing? The thought of prolonging this charade, of continuing to endure Rebecca's cruelty, was almost too much to bear. Exactly. Your husband knew your daughter better than anyone. He knew that power would corrupt her quickly, and that you would need time to decide if you truly wanted to take everything back, or if you preferred to give Rebecca one last chance. Marta stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city carried on at its normal pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their lives. Lights glowed in office buildings and apartments. People hurried through the rain under umbrellas. Life continued in its relentless forward motion. She thought of Victor, of how he had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else in business. Apparently, he had also been 3 steps ahead in protecting his family. What do I have to do now? She asked without turning around. Go to a modest hotel. Act as if you've truly lost everything. Arthur's voice was steady, reassuring. I will monitor Rebecca's actions. According to your husband's instructions, she will show her true colors very soon. And what if she doesn't? Marta turned to face him. What if she's really changed, and this was just a reaction to her grief? Arthur came over and placed a fatherly hand on her shoulder. Marta, with all due respect, you and I both know that's not going to happen. Rebecca showed who she really is today. Your husband knew it, and that's why he prepared all of this. She took the documents and carefully placed them in her purse, her movements deliberate and precise. How much time do I have? The clause can be activated at any time within the next 6 months, but your husband suggested waiting at least 30 days to see the full pattern of Rebecca's behavior. They left the office after the sun had set. Arthur drove Marta to a discreet hotel in the center of the city, a place she never would have considered in her previous life, but which would now become her temporary home. It wasn't unpleasant, clean, functional, with a certain mid-range charm, but it was a far cry from the mansion she had left behind. One more thing, Marta, Arthur said before leaving her at the hotel entrance. Your husband left a letter for you with instructions to give it to you only after Rebecca had shown her true character. He took a sealed envelope from his briefcase. I believe the time has come. Marta was left alone in that small, modest room with the envelope in her trembling hands. On the front, written in Victor's familiar hand, was her name, For my dearest Marta, the strongest woman I know. She sat on the hotel bed, and under the dim light of the nightstand lamp, broke the seal of the envelope. Victor's handwriting was unmistakable, that elegant script she had admired for 40 years of marriage. My dearest Marta, if you are reading this, it means that Rebecca has shown her true colors, and that my plan is unfolding as I expected. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive, but I needed your reaction to be genuine so that she would fully believe in her victory. Over the last few years, I have watched our daughter become increasingly greedy and cruel. Remember when she fired Mr. Rossi, our gardener, just because he asked for a small raise after 20 years of loyal service, or when she refused to help her cousin Angelica when she lost her job. I have seen how she treats the household staff, how she talks about people with less money than us. I tried to correct this behavior to instill in her the values of compassion and humility that you and I share, but I fear I failed. But there is something else you must know, my love. The $300 million that appear in the official will are not our entire fortune. There are additional accounts, properties registered in your name, investments that only you and I know about. The real total of our estate is $450 million. The additional accounts are at First National Bank, Downtown Branch, under your maiden name, Marta Celestina Vasquez. The password is the date of our first kiss, May 15, 1985. Arthur has all the necessary documents, but he will only give them to you when you are ready to take full control. Your task now is to observe. Let Rebecca believe she has everything, and you will see how absolute power corrupts absolutely. She will spend, she will squander, and she will show her true character to the world. When the time comes for you to reveal yourself as the true heir, she will have already learned the value of humility in the hardest way possible. But remember, my love, the goal is not to punish her, but to save her. Our daughter has lost her way, but there is still time for her to find her true heart. Only through loss can she appreciate what truly matters. I trust you to make the right decisions at the right time. You are the wisest and most compassionate woman I know, and I know you will find a way to turn this tragedy into an opportunity for growth for our entire family. I love you eternally, Victor P.S. At the bank, you will also find an additional surprise. Our old friend Tobias has been discreetly managing some tech investments that aren't even included in the main calculations. Let's just say our real net worth might be even higher than you imagine. Marta folded the letter carefully and put it in her purse alongside the legal documents. Her mind began to process all the information. Victor had not only protected her financially, but had also created an opportunity to teach Rebecca a lesson that could save her soul. He had seen what Marta had refused to acknowledge, that their daughter had grown into someone they no longer recognized. She picked up the hotel phone and dialed Arthur's number. "I read the letter," she said simply. "Tomorrow I want to go to the bank. I need to fully understand the situation before I decide on my next steps." "Of course. I'll pick you up at 9:00 in the morning," he replied. "And Marta, your husband, was an extraordinary man. What he did for you, for your family, is the deepest act of love I've seen in my 30 years as a lawyer." Marta barely slept that night, not from anxiety or sadness, but from a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time since Victor's death, she felt she had a clear purpose. It wasn't about getting the money back. It was about getting her daughter back. The next day, Arthur arrived at the hotel punctually. During the drive to the bank, he explained the additional details Victor had entrusted to him. "Your husband began to suspect the change in Rebecca about 2 years ago," he told her as they drove through the downtown streets. "That's when he started to discreetly restructure some of his assets. He wanted to ensure you were protected no matter what happened." At the bank, the personal manager, an elegant woman named Danielle, greeted them with the formality befitting accounts of that size. "Mrs. Marta." "I am so sorry for your loss," she said as she guided them to a private office with wood-paneled walls and leather chairs. "Your husband was a highly respected client here, and let me tell you, the provisions he made to protect you are extraordinarily intelligent." Over the next 2 hours, Danielle explained the true extent of the estate Victor had built, the additional investments, the international properties, the mutual funds that had grown silently for years. The current total, considering market fluctuations since Mr. Victor's passing, amounts to $462 million, she finally informed them, showing detailed spreadsheets on her computer screen. Marta leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Victor had achieved, and more importantly by the complexity of the plan he had designed to protect his family. "And what about the accounts Rebecca knows about?" she asked. "Those accounts do indeed exist and contain the $300 million mentioned in the official will. However, they are subject to the clauses Mr. Arthur has already explained to you. If those clauses are activated, those funds will also revert to you automatically." They left the bank with a new perspective. Marta was not a helpless widow who had just lost everything. She was a woman with enough resources to change the course of this story according to her own decisions. But first, she needed to see just how far Rebecca was willing to go in her new role as a millionaire heiress. For the next 2 weeks, Marta became a silent observer of her daughter's transformation. From her modest hotel room, and with Arthur's discreet help, she watched as Rebecca began to show her true face to the world. The first sign came just 3 days after she threw Marta out. Arthur called with a report that chilled her blood. "Marta, she fired the entire household staff," he said in a grave voice. "Maria, who had been your cook for 15 years. Elena, the housekeeper, who practically watched her grow up. All of them. She gave them 1 week's severance and let them go with no more explanation than, 'I no longer need you.'" Maria had called Arthur in tears, asking if she had done something wrong. This woman had prepared thousands of meals for their family, had cared for Rebecca as a child, had been like a second mother to her. "What reason did she give them?" Marta asked, though she already feared the answer. According to Maria, Rebecca told her that people like her no longer had a place in her new life, that she was going to hire more sophisticated staff, more in line with her new economic status. Marta closed her eyes and felt a pang of pain in her chest. Victor had been right. The money was revealing their daughter's true nature, and it wasn't pretty. But that was just the beginning. A week later, Arthur showed her photographs that a private investigator hired on Victor's instructions had taken. The images showed Rebecca emerging from luxury boutiques with shopping bags worth more than her former employees' annual salaries. She spent $150,000 in a single day, Arthur informed her, as they reviewed the receipts he had legally obtained. Clothes, jewelry, shoes, things she doesn't need just because she can buy them. What hurt the most was a photograph of Rebecca laughing with her new friends, those superficial women who had only appeared after hearing about her inheritance. In the picture, she was wearing a gold dress that cost more than Maria's car while sipping champagne from a $1,000 bottle. "There's more." Arthur continued, his expression becoming even more serious. "Yesterday she went to the country club, where you and your husband had been members for 20 years. She canceled your membership and asked that you be removed from all records." "What?" Marta whispered, feeling as if she'd been punched in the stomach. "She told the manager that you were no longer relevant and that she didn't want your name associated with hers anywhere." Marta sat on the hotel bed and cried. Not for the club membership, but for the calculated cruelty of her actions. Rebecca wasn't just enjoying her new wealth. She was deliberately erasing Marta's existence from her life. That afternoon, Marta received a call she never expected. It was Mr. Rossi, their former gardener, the man Rebecca had fired years ago for asking for a raise. "Mrs. Marta, I am so sorry to bother you during this difficult time," he said in his gentle voice, "but I need to tell you something that happened yesterday." Mr. Rossi explained that he had gone to the house to offer his condolences for Victor's death, but Rebecca had greeted him with a coldness that left him speechless. "She told me that people like me had no right to be in that house. She screamed at me to leave and never come back, that the poor couldn't contaminate her new life." He recounted, his voice breaking. "Mrs. Marta, that man was like a father to me for 20 years. I cared for those gardens as if they were my own, and she treated me like I was trash." After hanging up, Marta sat in silence for hours. Victor had predicted this exactly. He had seen something in Rebecca that Marta had refused to acknowledge, an inherent cruelty that power and money were magnifying until it turned her into a monster. The next day, Arthur brought even more disturbing news. "Rebecca is planning to sell properties," he said, spreading several documents on the hotel's coffee table. "The beach house in the Hamptons where you spent your summers. The penthouse apartment downtown that your husband bought when Rebecca went to college. She's even considering selling the office building where Victor built his empire." "Why would she sell all that?" Marta asked, though she suspected the answer. According to the real estate broker, she wants immediate liquidity for more exciting investments. Apparently, some new friends have convinced her to invest in businesses that promise quick returns. Over the following days, Marta watched from the shadows as Rebecca methodically continued to destroy everything Victor and she had built. Not just the material wealth, but also the relationships, the values, and the legacy of respect their family had maintained for decades. The last straw came exactly 3 weeks after her eviction. Arthur called her at 6:00 in the morning, something he would only do in an emergency. "Marta, you need to come to my office immediately," he said urgently. "Rebecca has done something that changes everything." An hour later, Marta was sitting at Arthur's desk, watching a video on his computer that left her breathless. In the recording taken by the country club security cameras, Rebecca was seen arriving at a charity gala that Victor and Marta had organized annually for the past 10 years. The event was continuing this year in Victor's memory, and Rebecca was expected to make a symbolic donation to maintain the family tradition. Instead, they watched her arrive with an arrogant attitude, dressed like a queen, and interrupt the event to announce that she was canceling all the donations their family had pledged. "My father is dead," they heard her say to a horrified audience, "and with him died his stupid charities. This money has better uses than being wasted on people who don't know how to appreciate it." The faces of shock and disgust in the video were palpable. These were people who had known and respected Victor for decades, who had watched Rebecca grow up, who had trusted their family. "But there's more," Arthur said, switching to another video. This happened afterward in the parking lot. In this second recording, they saw Rebecca being confronted by Henry, an old friend of Victor's, who ran one of the foundations benefiting from their donations. "Rebecca, your father would be ashamed," Henry was saying with evident sadness. "These donations help hundreds of families in need. How can you be so cruel?" Rebecca's response shattered Marta's soul. "My father was a sentimental fool. I'm smarter than he was. Money was made to be enjoyed, not given away to losers who don't know how to work." Arthur stopped the video and looked Marta directly in the eye. "Marta, I think the time has come to activate the clauses of the will. Your daughter has crossed every possible line." But Marta had other plans. Victor had given her not only the legal tools to get everything back, but also the wisdom to understand that this wasn't just about money. It was about saving her daughter's soul before it was too late. "Not yet, Arthur," she told him with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. "First, I'm going to give her the opportunity to face the consequences of her own actions." Silently, her composure a shield against the pain of betrayal, Marta prepared for the next phase of Victor's plan. The money hadn't made Rebecca cruel. It had merely revealed what was already there, hidden beneath years of pretense. But just as wealth could corrupt its loss, could teach lessons that no words ever could. For the first time since Victor's death, Marta felt a sense of purpose stronger than grief. The path ahead would be difficult, but she would walk it with the dignity and wisdom that had always been her strength. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for the daughter she refused to give up on. She stood by the hotel window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was reveling in her newfound power, unaware that every move she made was being watched by someone who held far more power than she could possibly imagine. Arthur's urgent voice penetrated the early morning quiet. "Marta, you need to come to my office immediately. Rebecca has done something that changes everything." The security footage from the country club gala played on Arthur's computer screen, revealing Rebecca's public denouncement of her father's charitable commitments. Marta watched in silent horror as her daughter's cold words echoed through the elegant ballroom. "My father is dead, and with him died his stupid charities." The parking lot confrontation that followed twisted the knife deeper. Henry Victor's friend of 30 years approached Rebecca with pained disbelief. "Your father would be ashamed," his voice cracking with emotion. "These donations help hundreds of families in need." Rebecca's face hardened into something unrecognizable. "My father was a sentimental fool. I'm smarter than he was. Money was made to be enjoyed, not given away to losers who don't know how to work." Arthur stopped the video, his expression grim. "Marta, I think the time has come to activate the clauses of the will. Your daughter has crossed every possible line." Marta gazed out the window at the city awakening below her mind made up. "Not yet, Arthur. First, I'm going to give her the opportunity to face the consequences of her own actions." In that moment, she understood Victor's plan with perfect clarity. This wasn't about punishing Rebecca, but saving her soul from the corruption of wealth without wisdom. "Are you sure?" Arthur's brow furrowed with concern. "She's dismantling everything you and Victor built." Marta turned back to him, her posture straight, despite the weight of grief and betrayal. "Sometimes the most profound lessons come not from what others tell us, but from what life teaches us when we stumble." Victor had understood this principle, and now she would honor his foresight by allowing it to unfold. Arthur nodded slowly, respecting her decision. "I'll continue monitoring her activities. Just say the word when you're ready." Marta didn't have to wait long for the universe to begin collecting on Rebecca's cruelty. The consequences arrived exactly 1 month after the eviction in a form neither of them had anticipated. The call came on a Tuesday morning as Marta was reading the newspaper in her hotel room. Arthur's voice held an unmistakable note of vindication. "Rebecca's new investment partners have disappeared. They took $50 million. Marta sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, processing this information. $50 million, 1/6 of the inheritance, Rebecca believed she completely controlled. How did it happen? According to our investigator, Rebecca met these entrepreneurs at an exclusive charity gala 3 weeks ago. They promised to double her investment in 6 months through a European art import business. Arthur forwarded details via email as they spoke the names of the scammers, their aliases, the fake bank accounts they had used. It had been a sophisticated operation targeting newly wealthy heirs precisely like Rebecca, preying on greed and inexperience. "The worst part," Arthur continued, "is that she signed the documents without consulting me. She told them she no longer needed lawyers because she trusted her business instincts." Marta wasn't surprised. Rebecca had always believed herself more clever than she was, a dangerous combination with newfound wealth and no oversight. Victor had predicted this exact scenario his daughter needed to learn firsthand, that money without wisdom was like a ship without a rudder, vulnerable to every predatory wind. That afternoon, Marta's phone lit up with a name she never expected to see again. Rebecca. For a moment, her finger hovered over the screen, hesitating before answering. "Mom." Rebecca's voice sounded different, smaller, frightened, stripped of its recent arrogance. She sounded like the little girl who used to crawl into their bed during thunderstorms. Marta kept her voice neutral, betraying none of the mixture of concern and vindication stirring within her. "Hello, Rebecca. I need to talk to you. Could we meet?" The request carried none of the commanding tone from their last encounter. "Where would you like to meet?" Marta noticed how Rebecca avoided mentioning the house, their house. "Could you come to the house, please?" The plea in her voice was unmistakable. 30 minutes later, Marta stood at the front door where she'd been unceremoniously evicted just a month before. Rebecca opened it immediately, as if she'd been watching from the window. The transformation in her appearance was shocking. Her perfectly styled hair hung limply around her face, makeup smudged beneath bloodshot eyes, wearing the same green dress from the day before. The mansion itself had undergone an equally dramatic transformation. The furniture Marta and Victor had chosen together over decades had been replaced with cold modern pieces that looked expensive but soulless. The family photographs that once lined the hallway had disappeared, replaced by abstract art that seemed to scream wealth rather than whisper history. Even the familiar scent of the house lemon polish and fresh flowers had been replaced by an artificial designer fragrance. Rebecca led Marta to the living room, her steps lacking their usual confident stride. She collapsed onto an angular white sofa that looked more like a sculpture than something designed for comfort. "I was scammed, Mom," she confessed, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I lost $50 million. Those men I trusted disappeared with everything. The lawyers I consulted said it's nearly impossible to recover the money they used fake identities and accounts in tax havens." Marta sat beside her daughter, fighting the maternal urge to immediately comfort her. This was precisely the lesson Victor had foreseen, and she knew she had to let it take full effect. "What happened exactly?" Her question was gentle but probing. Rebecca explained how she'd met sophisticated, charming men at a gallery opening who'd impressed her with their knowledge of European art markets and investment strategies. They'd shown her documents of previous successful ventures, introduced her to fake, satisfied clients, and promised to double her investment within 6 months. "I wanted to prove I could grow the fortune even bigger than Dad had." Rebecca admitted, her voice small. "To show everyone I wasn't just living off his success." "And what are you going to do now?" Marta asked, maintaining her composure. Rebecca wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a childlike gesture that momentarily revealed the daughter Marta remembered. "I don't know. Arthur refused to help me when I asked him to take the case." Of course Arthur had refused. He knew perfectly well that this situation was part of Victor's plan to teach Rebecca about the consequences of her actions. "Rebecca, why did you call me?" Marta asked, directly, needing to gauge whether this was merely a desperate grab for help or the beginning of genuine contrition. Rebecca looked up, and for the first time in months, Marta saw something resembling humility in her eyes. Because I realized I have no one else. All those friends I thought I had vanished as soon as they heard about the lost money, and I treated all the people who truly loved me terribly." The tears flowed harder. "Especially you, Mom. What I did to you was unforgivable. I threw you out of the house right after Dad's funeral when you needed me most. I was cruel. I was horrible to you." It was the first time Marta had heard her daughter take responsibility for her actions in years. Still, she knew they hadn't reached the bottom of this lesson yet. "And what do you expect me to do now?" "I don't know." Rebecca admitted vulnerability, replacing the entitlement that had dominated her personality for so long. "I know I don't deserve your help after what I did, but could you stay? Could you help me figure out how to get out of this mess?" Marta agreed to stay that night, but not in her old master bedroom. Rebecca had turned that space into her own, removing every last trace of Victor. Instead, she slept in the guest room, a constant reminder of how her status in this house had changed. Over the next few days, Marta watched as Rebecca struggled with the reality of her decisions. The remaining money was still a considerable fortune, but the loss had frightened her deeply. For the first time in her life, she understood that money was not infinite and that bad decisions had real consequences. "Mom, do you think Dad would be disappointed in me?" she asked one night as they ate dinner in silence. The question broke Marta's heart because she knew Victor had foreseen this exact situation. He had loved his daughter enough to allow her to make painful mistakes if it meant she would learn crucial lessons. "Your father loved you deeply, Rebecca, but he also valued honesty, compassion, and responsibility. What do you think?" Rebecca looked down at her barely touched plate. "I think he'd be very disappointed, not just because of the lost money, but because of how I treated people. You, Maria, Mr. Rossi, everyone who loved us for years." "And what do you plan to do about it?" "I don't know if there's anything I can do. Some things can't be undone, can they?" That question showed Marta that Rebecca was finally beginning to understand the gravity of her actions. But the most important test was yet to come. 3 days later, Arthur called Marta early in the morning with news she knew would eventually arrive. "The bank is requesting audits of all the estate accounts. Apparently someone reported suspicious movements after the scam." "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to temporarily freeze all the assets while they investigate. Rebecca will effectively be cut off from her money for at least 2 months. Marta hung up the phone and went upstairs to tell Rebecca. Her reaction would tell Marta everything she needed to know about whether she had truly learned anything from this experience. Rebecca was silent for several long minutes, processing the information. Then, to Marta's surprise, her first words were not of panic or despair. "I guess this is what I deserve. After everything I did, after how I treated everyone, maybe it's time I learned to live like a normal person." That response gave Marta hope. But she knew the real test would come in the following weeks, when Rebecca had to face the consequences of her actions without the safety net of her inheritance. The next 2 months were the most revealing of Rebecca's life. With her bank accounts frozen and only the cash she had on hand, she was forced to confront a reality she had never experienced: financial limitation. At first, she tried to maintain her extravagant lifestyle with credit cards and by selling jewelry she had bought. But when the bills started piling up and payments came due, reality hit her like a cold slap. "Mom, I don't understand how this works," she confessed one morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of her. "These numbers don't add up. The monthly expenses for the house are higher than any normal salary." It was the first time in her life she had seen the real bills for maintaining their lifestyle. Victor and Marta had always handled everything, shielding her from financial responsibilities, to the point of turning her into an adult who didn't know the real price of anything. "How much do you think it costs to maintain this house monthly?" Marta asked, genuinely curious if Rebecca had any concept of reality. Rebecca bit her lip uncertainly. $5,000, $22,000, Marta corrected, showing her the bills for utilities maintenance insurance and the cleaning staff Rebecca had hired after firing their loyal employees. And that's not including food gas or any personal expenses just to keep the lights on and the house running. Rebecca's face turned pale as she truly began to understand the magnitude of her situation. Without access to the main accounts and with the fixed expenses she had created, she was running out of money fast. "What am I going to do?" she murmured. And for the first time since she was a little girl, Marta saw real fear in her eyes. "Well," Marta suggested calmly, "you could start by getting a job." Rebecca laughed bitterly. "A job, Mom? I don't know how to do anything. I've never worked a day in my life. Who's going to hire me?" It was a valid and painful question. Rebecca was 35 years old, with a college degree she had never used, and absolutely no work experience. Victor and Marta had thought they were protecting her by giving her everything she needed. In reality, they had left her completely defenseless in the real world. Over the next week, Marta watched as Rebecca tried to find work. Her first attempts were pathetic and revealing. She applied for management positions at prestigious companies, believing her last name and education would be enough. "They told me I need experience," she reported after her fifth failed interview, frustration evident in her voice. "How am I supposed to get experience if no one will give me a chance?" "Maybe you should start with something more basic," Marta suggested. "Something where you can learn while you work." Rebecca's pride resisted at first. The idea of working in retail or customer service seemed humiliating to someone who had never needed to serve others. But when the second overdue electricity bill arrived and the bank threatened to cut off services, her perspective began to change. Finally, after 3 weeks of searching, she got a part-time job at a clothing boutique in a shopping mall 15 minutes from the mansion. The salary was $1,200 a month, an amount she used to spend in a single afternoon of shopping. "It's humiliating, Mom," she complained after her first day. "The manager is 20 years younger than me and treats me like I'm an idiot. And the customers, some of them are so rude." Marta avoided commenting on the irony that Rebecca was now experiencing the same treatment she had given others for years. Instead, she asked, "How do you feel working?" "Tired," Rebecca admitted, collapsing onto the sofa and kicking off her shoes. "My feet hurt, my back hurts, and I don't understand how people do this every day for decades." But something interesting began to happen after the second week. Rebecca started to talk differently about her job and the people she met there. "There's this woman Danielle who works the morning shift," she mentioned one night as they ate a simple dinner Marta had prepared. "She has 3 kids and supports her sick mother with 2 jobs. She never complains, she's never late, and she's always smiling. I don't understand how she does it." "Have you talked to her?" "A little. She told me she's been working there for 12 years. She started when she got divorced and needed to support her kids on her own." Rebecca paused, staring into her glass of water, as if seeing something beyond it. "Mom, I complained about losing $50 million, but Danielle has probably never seen $50,000 all at once in her life, and she is so much stronger than I am." It was the first time Marta had heard Rebecca express genuine admiration for someone who didn't have money or social status. Victor would have been proud of this small step toward real empathy. The real turning point came a month later when Rebecca witnessed something that fundamentally changed her perspective. "Mom, something horrible happened at work today." She began that evening visibly disturbed. "Danielle got a call from the hospital. Her youngest son was in an accident and needs an operation that costs $15,000. Her insurance doesn't cover all of it." What happened? She fell apart completely. I've never seen someone so desperate. "She told me she doesn't have that kind of money, that she'd already used all her savings on her mother's medicine, and she doesn't know what to do." Rebecca was quiet for several long minutes, and Marta could see her struggling internally with something profound. "Mom," she finally said, her voice resolute, "I have jewelry worth more than that operation. I have dresses in my closet that cost more than Danielle's annual salary, and she has to choose between saving her son and feeding her family. What are you going to do about it?" "I want to help her. I'm going to sell some of my jewelry. That diamond bracelet I bought last month for $20,000, I don't even really like it. I can sell it and give the money to Danielle." That night, while Rebecca slept, Marta called Arthur. "How is the plan progressing?" he asked. "Better than Victor could have hoped," Marta replied. "I think she's really changing. For the first time in years, I see her as the compassionate girl she used to be." "Is it time to reveal the truth?" "Not yet. There's one more test she needs to pass. I need to know if this change is permanent or just temporary desperation." The next day, Rebecca did indeed sell the bracelet and gave the money to Danielle. When Marta saw the tears of gratitude in that hard-working woman's eyes and the look of profound satisfaction on her daughter's face, she knew they had reached a crucial point. But the universe had one final lesson prepared for Rebecca, one that not even Victor had foreseen. That same week, a letter arrived in the mail that would change everything once more. It was from a different lawyer, one representing the estate of Tobias Vasquez Victor's distant brother, who had recently died. Mrs. Rebecca, the letter read, "We regret to inform you that Mr. Tobias Vasquez passed away last month and has named you as his sole heir. His estate is valued at approximately $75 million. Rebecca dropped the letter and looked at Marta with wide eyes. $75 million more, she whispered in disbelief. After everything I've been through, after everything I've learned, the money just comes back. This was the final test. What would Rebecca do with a new fortune after having experienced relative poverty and discovered compassion? The letter about Tobias's inheritance was real, but there was a detail Rebecca didn't know. Marta held veto power over that inheritance according to a family agreement Victor had established years ago. Tobias had been Victor's younger brother, a solitary man who had always respected Victor's judgment about family matters. Marta decided not to reveal this detail immediately. Instead, she wanted to see how Rebecca would react to the possibility of regaining a fortune after hitting rock bottom. Her first reaction was revealing. "I can't believe it," she murmured, rereading the letter for the 5th time. "Just when I thought I'd lost everything, when I was finally learning to live differently, this shows up." "How do you feel about it?" Marta asked, watching her expression carefully. "Confused," Rebecca admitted, setting the letter down on the coffee table. 2 months ago, this would have been the answer to all my problems. I would have immediately run to claim the money and gone back to my old life. But now I'm not so sure I want to go back to that life." She sat on the sofa and looked out the window at the garden Mr. Rossi had tended so lovingly for years. "Mom, do you know what I discovered working at that store? I discovered that I'm capable of things I never thought I could do, that I can work for 8 hours straight, that I can solve problems, that I can help people. And for the first time in my life, when someone says thank you to me, I know I've truly earned it." Her words filled Marta with hope she hadn't felt in months. This was the Rebecca that Victor and she had hoped to see emerge one day. "But I also know that $75 million could help a lot of people," Rebecca continued, her brow furrowed in thought. "I could help Danielle, Maria, Mr. Rossi, all the people I treated so badly when I thought money made me superior to them." That night, Rebecca did something that completely surprised Marta. Instead of celebrating or making plans to immediately claim the inheritance, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and began to write. "What are you doing?" Marta asked, bringing her a cup of tea. "I'm making a list," Rebecca replied without looking up. "A list of all the people I hurt, of all the things I did wrong, and of how I could use this money to make amends." For the next 2 hours, Marta watched her daughter write down names, amounts, and detailed plans. Danielle and her son were on the list, of course, but so were Maria, Mr. Rossi, the charitable foundations she had defunded, and even the employees at the boutique who worked for minimum wage. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Rebecca said when she finished writing, looking up with vulnerable honesty in her eyes. "Of course." "Do you think Dad would have forgiven me for everything I did?" The question broke Marta's heart because she knew Victor had planned this exact moment of self-discovery and repentance. "Your father loved you unconditionally, Rebecca, but more than forgiveness, he wanted you to find your way to becoming the person he knew you could be. And do you think I'm finding it?" Before Marta could answer, the phone rang. It was Arthur, and his voice sounded urgent. "Marta, I need to speak with you and Rebecca immediately. Something important has come up regarding Tobias's inheritance." "What kind of something?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can you both come to my office tomorrow morning?" Marta barely slept that night. She knew Arthur probably wanted to discuss her veto power over Tobias's inheritance, and that the time had come to make a crucial decision about Rebecca's future. The next day, they arrived early at Arthur's office. Rebecca was wearing her uniform from the boutique as she had to work after the meeting. Seeing her dressed so simply in comfortable shoes instead of designer heels reminded Marta how much she had changed in these past months. "Please have a seat," Arthur said with a serious expression. "Rebecca, there is something about your Uncle Tobias's inheritance that you need to know." Rebecca leaned forward, attentive, but not eager as she would have been 2 months ago. Your Uncle Tobias was a very wise man, and he was well aware of the situation that developed after your father's death. Before he died, he established a very specific condition for his inheritance. "What kind of condition?" Rebecca asked, and Marta could hear the anxiety in her voice. Arthur opened a folder and took out a document. "The inheritance can only be claimed if your mother Marta certifies in writing that you have demonstrated a fundamental change in character and that you are prepared to responsibly manage a fortune of that magnitude." The silence filled the office like a dense weight. Rebecca turned to Marta slowly, and Marta saw in her eyes a mixture of understanding surprise and something that looked like relief. "You knew about this?" she asked in a soft voice. "I found out last night when Arthur called me," Marta fibbed. This wasn't the time to reveal she had known this detail all along. "And what do you think?" Rebecca asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you think I've changed enough to deserve that responsibility?" It was the question Marta had been waiting for months. The question that would determine not only Rebecca's financial future, but also the kind of person she would become for the rest of her life. "Before I answer that," Marta said carefully, "I want to ask you a question. If I decided you weren't ready if you lost this inheritance forever, how would you feel?" Rebecca thought for several long moments before answering. 2 months ago, I would have been desperate. I would have begged. I would have promised anything. I would have made a scene. She paused and looked Marta directly in the eyes. "But now, I think I would be okay. I've learned that I can survive without millions of dollars. I've learned that I can work, that I can contribute, that I can be useful, even without a family fortune. And if I tell you that you are ready, what would you do with $75 million? Without hesitation, Rebecca pulled out the notebook she had been writing in the night before. "First, I would repair all the damage I did. I would compensate the people I hurt, restore the donations I canceled, and make sure that no one else suffers because of my past selfishness." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "Then I would use the money to create real opportunities, educational scholarships, job training programs, support for single mothers like Danielle. And for you, what would be left for your personal life? Enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. I no longer need to prove my worth by what I buy or where I live." She smiled with a warmth Marta hadn't seen in years. "Mom, these past months taught me that true wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in the relationships you build, in the difference you make in the lives of others, in being able to look in the mirror and respect the person you see there." Arthur and Marta exchanged a look. It was clear that Rebecca had passed the final test. But there was still one more revelation, one that would change everything she thought she knew about the last few months of her life. "Rebecca," Marta said, taking a deep breath before continuing, "there's something else you need to know, something your father planned from the moment he began to worry about your character." Rebecca looked at her curiously, but Marta could see a flash of apprehension in her eyes. "Arthur, please show her the real documents," Marta requested. Arthur opened another folder much thicker than the previous one and spread several documents across the desk. Rebecca looked at them, not immediately understanding what she was seeing. "These are the documents from your father's real will," Marta began in a calm voice. "The one your father prepared knowing exactly what kind of reaction you would have when you believed you had inherited everything." "The real will," Rebecca whispered, her face turning pale. "Your father never left you the $300 million, Rebecca." Marta's voice remained steady, each word measured and precise. "Everything that has happened these past months, everything you have experienced, has been part of a carefully designed plan to save you from yourself." Rebecca's face drained of all color as Marta explained everything that had been hidden for months, the clause that returned the inheritance to her. If Rebecca demonstrated cruelty, the existence of additional accounts that Marta controlled, and the reality that she had never truly lost her position as the primary heir. "I knew what was happening all along," Marta continued, watching her daughter's eyes fill with tears of understanding. "I just wanted you to learn." "You mean?" Rebecca's voice broke, unable to complete the thought. I mean, your father loved you so much that he was willing to make you believe you had lost his love in order to save you. And I was willing to let you throw me out of the house, to treat me cruelly, to despise me, because I knew it was the only way you would discover who you truly wanted to be." Rebecca completely broke down. It wasn't the desperate cry of someone who had lost money, but the deep sob of someone who finally understood the magnitude of the love she had received without realizing it. "Dad knew I would become a monster," she gasped between sobs. "And still he found a way to save me. And you endured all my venom knowing you could stop me at any moment." "Your father wrote in his letter that the goal was never to punish you, but to save you," Marta said softly. "And I was willing to endure anything if it meant getting my daughter back." Arthur handed them a box of tissues and waited patiently as Rebecca processed the information that had shattered her understanding of the past months. "So the $50 million I lost to the scammers?" she asked through her tears. "That was real," Arthur confirmed. "That part wasn't planned. Your father had put that amount in accounts you could actually use, hoping you would make financial mistakes that would teach you valuable lessons. The scammers simply accelerated that process. And Uncle Tobias's inheritance, also real," Marta told her. "But as you now know, it was conditional on my approval. Your Uncle Tobias was part of your father's plan from the beginning." Rebecca wiped her eyes, her breathing gradually steadying as she absorbed the full scope of her father's foresight. "All this time I thought he just saw me as his princess, someone to spoil. But he saw me more clearly than anyone, didn't he? He saw what I was becoming, and he loved me enough to stop it." Arthur nodded, his professional demeanor softening. "Your father came to me 2 years ago with concerns about your character development. He said, 'Arthur, wealth without wisdom is a curse disguised as a blessing.' He spent months crafting this plan, considering every possible outcome. The most remarkable part," Marta added, "was that he insisted on creating a genuine opportunity for growth, not just punishment. He said that if you showed no capacity for change, at least I would be protected. But he believed in you, Rebecca. He believed you could find your way back to the compassionate child we once knew." Rebecca was silent for several long minutes, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she looked up at Marta with an expression that mixed pain, gratitude, and something that looked like awe. "Mom, can you forgive me?" she whispered. "Not just for these last few months, but for years of being selfish, cruel, and blind to everything you and Dad did for me." Marta reached across the desk and took her daughter's hands. "I've already forgiven you, Rebecca. I forgave you from the very first day, because I knew the daughter I raised was still in there somewhere beneath all that bitterness and greed." "And now what?" Rebecca asked, her voice small but steady. "What happens with all the money, with the real inheritance?" Marta took out a document she had prepared the night before with Arthur's help. "I've decided to divide everything equally between us," she explained, "but with specific conditions. Your portion will be in a trust jointly managed by the two of us. Every major financial decision will have to be made together, and a significant portion must be designated for charitable causes and for repairing the damage you caused." She laid the document on the desk between them. "If you don't accept these conditions, then you will receive a fixed sum to live comfortably, but you will not have access to the main fortune. The decision is yours." Rebecca didn't hesitate for a second. I accept all the conditions," her brow furrowed in thought. "Actually, I'd like to add some conditions of my own." Arthur raised an eyebrow, exchanging a surprised glance with Marta. "I want a stipulation that I must continue working in some capacity outside the family business or foundation for at least 1 year," Rebecca continued. "I need to remain grounded in reality, and I want a requirement that before any major purchase for personal use exceeding $10,000, I must submit a written justification for why it's necessary." Marta couldn't hide her surprise. "You want to place additional restrictions on yourself?" "I don't trust myself yet, Mom. I've changed, yes, but I've only just begun this journey. I need guardrails until these new values become second nature." Rebecca stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "During these past months, I've learned something I never understood before. Money only has value if you know how to use it to do good. Without that wisdom, it's just paper that corrupts your soul. And what about your job at the boutique? Marta asked. I'm going to keep working there, Rebecca answered with determination. At least for a while longer. Danielle and the other women have become my real friends, not like those leeches who used to surround me. And I like the feeling of earning my salary, however small it may be. Arthur began to prepare the official documents, while Rebecca and Marta discussed the next steps. But there was one more conversation they needed to have. Rebecca, there's something I need to ask you, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Are you doing all of this change in attitude, because you've truly changed, or because you now know that I control the money? It was the most important question, the one that would determine if everything they had been through had been worth it. Rebecca reflected carefully before answering. 2 hours ago, when I thought I was dependent on your approval to get Uncle Tobias's inheritance, I had already decided that even if you denied me that inheritance, I would keep trying to be a better person. Not for the money, but because I finally like the person I'm starting to become. She came to Marta and took her hands. Mom, these months of working, of struggling, of meeting real people with real problems taught me something that 35 years of privilege never could, that true wealth comes from the relationships you build and the good you do in the world. The money is just a tool to achieve that. And you're sure you won't go back to being the person you were before? I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, Rebecca admitted honestly, but I can promise that I will never again forget the lessons I learned these past months, and if I ever start to stray, I hope you'll stop me again. That afternoon, they signed all the necessary documents. Rebecca officially became the co-owner of a fortune that now amounted to over $500 million, including the inheritance from Tobias and the investments that had grown during the months of crisis. But more important than any amount of money was what they had recovered their relationship as mother and daughter and the opportunity to use their wealth to make a real difference in the world. When they left Arthur's office, Rebecca surprised Marta with an unexpected request. Mom, could we go visit Mr. Rossi first? I want to apologize to him personally and offer him not only his job back, but the chance to expand the gardens and maybe start a training program for other gardeners. The next morning, they drove to Mr. Rossi's modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood across town. The elderly gardener's eyes widened in surprise when he opened the door to find both Marta and Rebecca standing there. His small home was immaculately kept with potted plants filling every available surface, a gardener even in retirement. Miss Rebecca, Mrs. Marta, he stammered clearly, stunned by their appearance. Please come in. I don't have much to offer, but I just made some coffee. Rebecca stepped into the apartment but didn't immediately sit down. Mr. Rossi, I didn't come for coffee. I came to apologize. Her voice trembled slightly, but her gaze remained steady. The way I treated you both recently and over the years was inexcusable. You gave 40 years of your life to our family, and I repaid you with contempt. Mr. Rossi's weathered face softened. Miss Rebecca, please let me finish, she interrupted gently. My father taught me many lessons before he died, but I was too self-absorbed to hear them. I've finally begun to learn, and part of that learning is acknowledging the pain I've caused. She explained their plans to restore the garden to its former glory and expand it into a community space where Mr. Rossi could teach gardening skills to disadvantaged youth. We don't just want you back as our gardener, we want you as our director of horticultural programs with a full staff under your guidance. Mr. Rossi's eyes glistened with tears. Your father would be so proud to hear you speak this way. He poured them each a cup of coffee with slightly trembling hands. You know, Miss Rebecca, he used to say that plants teach us patience because we can't rush their growth. People are the same way. Some take longer to bloom, but when they do, the flower is all the more beautiful for the wait. Their next stop was a downtown hotel where Maria had found work after being fired. The kitchen manager was reluctant to let them see her during the busy lunch preparation, but eventually relented when Marta mentioned their shared history. Maria emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her face guarded. When she saw Rebecca, her expression hardened further. Maria, Rebecca began dispensing with formalities. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how deeply I regret what I did. She outlined a proposal similar to Mr. Rossi's, not just returning to work at the mansion, but developing a culinary training program for single mothers and at-risk youth. "Why should I believe anything you say?" Maria asked bluntly. "For years I cooked your favorite meals, nursed you when you were sick, listened to your problems, and you discarded me like yesterday's garbage." "You're right," Rebecca acknowledged without defensiveness. "I can't undo what I did. I can only try to be better going forward." Maria studied her former employer's daughter carefully. "There's something different about you," she finally said. "Your eyes. They remind me of your father's now." And by the end of the week, Rebecca had sought out each person she had wronged, from household staff to charity directors. Some accepted her apologies readily, others required more convincing. Henry, who ran the foundation that Victor had supported for decades, was particularly skeptical. "Words are easy, Rebecca," he said during their meeting in his modest office. "Your father made promises too, but he backed them with action year after year, without fanfare or recognition." "I don't expect you to trust me immediately," Rebecca replied. "I only ask for the opportunity to demonstrate through actions what I'm trying to express in words. Judge me by what I do from this point forward, not by what I say today." Through it all, Rebecca continued her shifts at the boutique. When her co-workers learned about her true background, most were stunned. One woman even quit feeling betrayed by the deception. But Danielle simply nodded, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. "I always knew there was more to your story," she told Rebecca during their lunch break. "People born into nothing don't look at price tags the way you did at first, with complete indifference." Rebecca laughed ruefully. "Was I that obvious?" "To someone who's spent her life counting pennies, yes." Danielle took a bite of her sandwich. "So what happens now?" "Back to your mansion and fancy parties." "Actually, I was hoping you might consider a new position," Rebecca replied. "We're starting a foundation, and we need someone who understands what it's really like to struggle, someone who won't be fooled by fancy proposals that look good on paper but don't address real needs." Danielle eyed her skeptically. "You're offering me a job. Doing what exactly?" "Community outreach coordinator. You'd be our reality check, making sure our programs actually help the people they're meant to serve." Rebecca smiled. "And the salary is considerably better than what you're making here." "I'll think about it," Danielle said, but her eyes betrayed her interest. At home, Marta and Rebecca began transforming the mansion. The ostentatious furniture Rebecca had purchased was donated to a women's shelter. Family photographs reappeared on the walls. The formal dining room was converted into a meeting space for their nascent foundation. Rebecca moved out of the master bedroom, returning it to Marta, and took a smaller room that better reflected her evolving values. 3 months after their reconciliation, while organizing the first annual meeting for their foundation, a letter arrived that would forever change their understanding of Victor's legacy. It came from a notary in New York, informing them of a safe deposit box that Victor had kept secret for years. The box could only be opened after certain specific conditions were met, that Rebecca had worked for her own money for at least 3 months, that she had genuinely helped someone in need, and that mother and daughter had signed official documents of reconciliation. "Dad really did think of everything," Rebecca murmured as they read the letter together. "He even had plans for after we learned the lessons." They traveled to New York the following week. The bank's security procedures were extensive, requiring multiple forms of identification and verification of the conditions specified in Victor's instructions. Finally, they were led into a private room where a medium-sized metal box awaited them. The bank officer discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone with this final message from Victor. Marta's hands trembled slightly as she inserted the key, and together they lifted the lid. Inside, they found not just financial documents, but a collection of letters, each sealed and marked for specific moments in their journey. The first was labeled, "For when Rebecca has learned the value of work." Rebecca broke the seal carefully and unfolded the pages covered in her father's distinctive handwriting. Her voice wavered as she read aloud, "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, it means you have discovered something I always knew was inside you, the capacity to be strong, independent, and compassionate. Work is not a punishment. It is a gift that connects you to your own ability and dignity. I watched with growing concern as wealth insulated you from the realities that forge character. Remember when you were 10 and you insisted on building a treehouse yourself rather than having the contractors do it? You worked for weeks making mistakes, starting over, until finally creating something imperfect but entirely yours. The pride in your eyes that day was worth more than any asset in my portfolio. Somewhere along the way, you lost that connection between effort and fulfillment. My greatest regret is that I contributed to this by trying to make your life too easy. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in purpose. Now that you've experienced the satisfaction of earning your way, never forget this feeling. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful accomplishment is built. With pride and love, Dad. Rebecca wiped away tears before reaching for the second letter addressed to Marta, the bravest woman I know, my eternal love. Marta read it silently first, her expression softening with each line. Then she shared portions aloud. Thank you for being strong when I could not be. Thank you for loving our daughter enough to let her make painful mistakes. I know these months have been the hardest of your life, but I also know you are the only person in the world capable of guiding Rebecca back to her true heart. Your quiet strength has always been my anchor. When I first suspected the changes in Rebecca, you counseled patience while I wanted intervention. You were right, as you so often are, that direct confrontation would only drive her further away. The plan we ultimately devised merged your compassion with my strategic thinking, a perfect reflection of our partnership. I wish I could be there to see the reunion of the two women I love most in this world. Know that wherever I am watching with immeasurable pride. But it was the third letter that transformed everything. Marked simply, for when mother and daughter are truly family again, it revealed a secret that Victor had kept even from Arthur. My two loves. If you are reading this together, it means the miracle I hoped for has happened. Rebecca, you have discovered that true wealth is not in what you possess, but in what you give. Marta, you have proven once again that true love sometimes requires the greatest courage. Now I must share with you the work that has given my life its deepest meaning. For the past 5 years, I have been silently donating millions of dollars to charitable organizations worldwide. I did this anonymously outside our family foundation because I wanted to ensure these gifts came from pure intention, not public recognition. I have funded the college education of over 500 low-income students. I have built 3 hospitals in rural areas of Mexico and Colombia. I have established programs for single mothers, funded child nutrition initiatives, and supported shelters for victims of domestic violence. The true value of our family estate, including these ongoing commitments, is approximately $650 million. But this wealth comes with the profound responsibility to continue this work not as an obligation, but as the privilege it truly is. In this box, you will find detailed documentation of these projects, along with deeds to properties in each location where we maintain operations. These are not vacation homes, but working centers from which to oversee our initiatives. I urge you to visit them to meet the people whose lives have been touched, to see directly how decisions made in comfortable offices translate to real change in the world. My greatest hope is that you will not merely continue this work, but expand it according to your own vision and talents. Rebecca, your business acumen could transform these individual projects into sustainable systems of change. Marta, your empathy will ensure we never lose sight of the human beings behind the statistics. Together, you are capable of more good than I could ever accomplish alone. With eternal love, Victor. The letter fell from Rebecca's hands as she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what her father had built in secret. All this time, she whispered, when I thought he was just making more money, he was changing the world. That was Victor, Marta said softly. He never believed wealth was an achievement in itself, only a tool for creating something meaningful. They spent hours reviewing the contents of the box photographs of facilities they'd never seen, letters of gratitude from people they'd never met, detailed reports on programs they'd never known existed. The scope of Victor's philanthropy was staggering, encompassing education, healthcare, microfinance, and environmental conservation across 3 continents. Mom, Rebecca finally said, her voice hushed with wonder. "Do you realize what this means?" "It means your father wasn't just teaching us about money and character," Marta replied, clutching a photograph of Victor standing anonymously among patients at one of his hospitals. "He was preparing us to become stewards of a legacy that goes far beyond our family." Over the next few weeks, they began contacting the organizations Victor had secretly supported. Each conversation revealed new dimensions of his quiet generosity. The director of a women's shelter in Chicago broke down in tears, describing how Victor's anonymous donation had saved them from closure. A university administrator explained how the scholarship fund he established had transformed an entire community by making higher education accessible to first-generation students. "It's overwhelming," Rebecca confessed to Marta late one night as they reviewed impact reports. "Dad helped thousands of people without ever expecting recognition or gratitude. How can we possibly live up to that example?" "We don't have to match it immediately," Marta answered. "We just have to start one family at a time, one project at a time, guided by the same principles that drove him." They decided to begin with a visit to the hospital in rural Colombia that Victor had funded. The journey took them from their comfortable world to a region where basic health care had once been a luxury. The facility wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, well-equipped, and staffed by dedicated professionals who received fair compensation. What struck Rebecca most was not the building itself, but the relationships Victor had built. The hospital administrator, Dr. Fuentes, spoke of him not as a wealthy donor, but as a collaborator who asked questions, listened to experts, and respected local knowledge. "Your father would sit in our waiting room for hours, watching, listening, doctor," Fuentes explained as he showed them through the pediatric ward. He wanted to understand the real needs before offering solutions. As they toured the facility, Rebecca found herself drawn to the maternity ward, where new mothers cradled infants who might not have survived without this hospital. One young woman, barely 20, beckoned her over to see twin boys born prematurely, but now thriving. "The doctor says they would have died without the special machines," she explained through an interpreter, her face radiant with maternal pride. "I named them Victor and Gabriel for the angel who built this place and the angel who watches over children." Rebecca reached out tentatively, and the mother placed one tiny infant in her arms. The weight of this new life, this concrete example of what wealth could accomplish when properly directed, affected her more profoundly than any spreadsheet or impact report. "This is what Dad wanted us to understand," she whispered to Marta, who had joined her. "Money isn't a prize we won. It's a tool we've been entrusted with to do good in the world." The journey home was filled with discussion of what they'd seen and how they might build upon it. Rebecca, who had always applied her business degree primarily to shopping and socializing, now brought that analytical mind to questions of sustainable impact. "The hospital model is excellent," she observed, making notes on her laptop. "But what about preventative care? Could we establish satellite clinics in the most remote villages and education programs for basic hygiene and nutrition?" Marta watched her daughter with quiet pride. The entitled socialite was gone, replaced by a thoughtful woman grappling with complex problems. "Your father would be amazed to hear you talk this way." "I don't know about that," Rebecca replied with a small smile. "I think he saw this potential in me long before I did. He was just waiting for me to discover it myself." Back home, they transformed the mansion's formal study into planning headquarters for the Victor Sullivan Foundation. The walls that had once displayed hunting trophies now held maps marking their projects worldwide. Rebecca's business contacts, formerly used for securing invitations to exclusive events, were now approached for partnerships in sustainable development initiatives. At the boutique, Rebecca's manager noticed the change in her priorities and offered more flexible hours to accommodate her foundation work. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Rebecca declined. "I need this," she explained to Marta. "The routine, the ordinary interactions, the reminder of what real life is like for most people. I don't want to lose that perspective." But she did accept when Danielle finally agreed to join the foundation, bringing her practical wisdom and unflinching honesty to their planning sessions. "You people overthink everything," she remarked during a particularly theoretical discussion about microfinance. Women don't need a dissertation on economic empowerment. They need enough money to start a business without signing their lives away to predatory lenders. 6 months after discovering Victor's secret philanthropy, they officially launched the Victor Sullivan Foundation with a ceremony at the mansion. Instead of the lavish gala Rebecca would once have insisted on, they hosted a modest gathering that reflected their new priorities. The guest list included not celebrities or socialites, but the people who would be the heart of their work staff members, community partners, and beneficiaries. Maria prepared the food-recreating dishes that Victor had loved. Mr. Rossi provided flower arrangements from the garden now flourishing under his renewed care. Arthur gave a short speech about Victor's vision that left few dry eyes in the room. When it was Rebecca's turn to speak, she stood before the gathered guests with a confidence that came not from entitlement, but from purpose. My father understood something that I'm only beginning to grasp, that we are defined not by what we have, but by what we do with it. The Victor Sullivan Foundation will continue his legacy of anonymous, impactful giving. We will listen before we act, respect the expertise of those we serve, and measure our success not by recognition, but by lives improved. She paused, looking around at the diverse group assembled in what had once been her exclusive domain. My journey to this moment has not been graceful or direct. I had to lose everything to discover what truly matters. But that's the lesson my father wanted me to learn, that wealth without purpose is the most insidious form of poverty. The foundation grew rapidly, expanding from Victor's initial projects to new initiatives developed under Rebecca's leadership. She insisted on rigorous evaluation of their programs, wanting proof that they were making meaningful differences rather than just feeling good about giving. Marta focused on the human element, ensuring that efficiency never trumped compassion. Together, they created an organization that honored Victor's vision while reflecting their own strengths. A year after their reconciliation, they returned to the hospital in Colombia, this time to break ground on a new wing that would double its capacity. The local community welcomed them warmly, many sharing stories of how Victor's anonymous donations had changed their lives. During the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Rebecca, pressing something into her hand. It was a simple wooden carving of a bird in flight, lovingly polished. "Your father came here once," the woman explained through an interpreter. "He sat in our waiting room for hours, watching, listening. I asked why he was here, and he said he needed to see where his money went to make sure it was doing real good." The woman's weathered fingers closed over Rebecca's. "He told me that wealth was like water. Hold it too tightly, and it slips through your fingers. Let it flow to where it's needed, and it creates life wherever it goes." That night in their hotel room, Rebecca placed the wooden bird on the nightstand and sat looking at it thoughtfully. "Mom, do you think Dad ever imagined we would end up here doing this work together?" Marta smiled, remembering the brilliant, far-sighted man she had married. "I think your father planted seeds knowing exactly what kind of garden he hoped would grow. He gave us the tools and trusted us to find our way." "You know what's the strangest part of all this?" Rebecca asked, lying back on her bed and staring at the ceiling. "What's that? I am happier now working 14 hours a day to help others than I ever was when I could buy anything I wanted. Dad was right. True happiness comes from knowing your life has a purpose greater than yourself." When they returned home, they discovered that their work had begun to attract attention. A major business magazine wanted to profile Rebecca as an example of next-generation philanthropic leadership. Initially, she resisted, uncomfortable with publicity after witnessing her father's commitment to anonymity. "Dad never sought recognition for his giving," she protested during a discussion with Arthur and Marta. "True," Arthur acknowledged, "but he also understood the power of example. By sharing your story, not to glorify yourself, but to illustrate transformation, you might inspire others who are trapped in the same cycle of meaningless accumulation." The resulting article, titled "The Heiress Who Learned to Work," captured Rebecca's journey from privileged socialite to purposeful philanthropist. It detailed the foundation's approaches to sustainable development and highlighted Victor's vision of wealth as responsibility. The response was overwhelming: emails, letters, and calls from wealthy individuals and families seeking guidance on bringing meaning to their fortunes. Some were parents worried about their children following Rebecca's earlier path. Others were inheritors themselves, feeling the emptiness that had once consumed her. "We need to do something with this," Rebecca told Marta after reading dozens of these messages. "There are so many families struggling with the same issues we faced." This insight led to their next initiative, a mentoring program for wealthy families navigating the complex emotional and ethical challenges of significant inheritance. Rebecca drew on her own painful journey to create a curriculum addressing not just financial management, but the deeper questions of purpose, identity, and responsibility that came with privilege. One evening, as they reviewed applications for their new microloan program for single mothers, Rebecca paused pen hovering over the approval sheet. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of us?" Marta looked at her daughter, this woman who had transformed from selfish and entitled to dedicated and purposeful. She thought of Victor, of his complex plan to save his family, of his faith that love and wisdom could triumph over greed and selfishness. "I think your father knew exactly what we would become," she answered softly. "And I think right now, wherever he is, he's smiling, because his plan not only worked, but surpassed even his most optimistic expectations." Rebecca nodded, a quiet contentment settling over her features as she returned to her work. Outside, the city lights twinkled in the gathering dusk. Inside, mother and daughter continued planning how to use their fortune to change the world, one life at a time. The mansion that had once been a monument to wealth had become a workshop of purpose. The gardens flourished under Mr. Rossi's care, now including plots where neighborhood families grew their own food. The kitchen bustled with Maria's culinary training program for disadvantaged youth. Meeting rooms that had hosted superficial socialites now welcomed community organizers and nonprofit leaders. And at the center of it all, Rebecca had found what her father had always hoped she would discover, that the most valuable inheritance wasn't the money he left behind, but the capacity to transform that wealth into meaningful change. Victor hadn't saved his daughter with money. He had saved her by teaching her how to save herself. And in the process, they had all discovered that the real fortune had never been their financial wealth, but the infinite capacity of the human heart to transform pain into compassion, selfishness into generosity, and loss into purpose. In her office, which had once been her father's study, Rebecca kept the wooden bird from Colombia on her desk. It reminded her daily of the lesson that had changed her life. True wealth, like water, creates life only when it flows freely to where it's needed most.